YouTube frogs, welcome back to another complete guide, this time covering the return of our handsome alchemist Albedo. We'll be taking a look at his optimal weapon choices, which I have limited to just 2, you know which 2 they are, and mentioning optional 5-star weapons in case you want to try a non-defense build Albedo, as well as his talents, constellations, artifact choices, team comps, and showcasing them in the abyss. If you are new here, first off, welcome to the channel, and I also stream nearly every day on Twitch. Feel free to check out my community over there and their chaotic chill vibes. Link in the description. Alright, let's begin. Timestamps are provided for your convenience. I also want to let you frogs know that this video is brought to you by the 2022 Hyundai Tucson and Santa Fe plug-in EVs. Hyundai has the widest range of electrified vehicles on the market, and with the 2022 Tucson and Santa Fe, you can use electric when you want it or gas when you need it. And unlike your Resin, both vehicles sport remote charging and flexible ways to fuel up. Digital Key allows you to use your Android phone as a spare key, so you can unlock your car without having to put Genshin back in your pocket. Take a break from farming those defense artifacts and head over to HyundaiUSA.com to learn more about the 2022 Tucson and Santa Fe.
Hey there, you getting some gas?
Just using your squeegee.
Well, this squeegee kind of comes with gas.
Squeegee isn't free?
Oh, that's free with gas.
Yeah, but it's a plug-in hybrid. I don't need gas.
Well, no gas, no squeegee.
No gas, no squeegee?
No gas, no squeegee.
No gas, no squeegee.
Now free squeegee?
Now free squeegee.
Squeegee.
Evolve your journey beyond the pump in the first ever Santa Fe plug-in hybrid EV.
Here's what my Albedo investment looks like since his first banner way back in 1.2 a Dragon Spine update. He's level 80 out of 80, Constellation 3, level 1, 11, 6 talents, plus 3 levels on his skill due to Constellation 3. Current set of artifacts on him, since I haven't been able to farm up half-decent husk pieces, are 2-piece Petra and 2-piece Noblesse, with the Noblesse pieces focusing mainly on the substats. Between the Cinnabar new weapon, which is available from day 1 of the new Snowstorms event and going to be tested in this video, and the usual Harbinger of Dawn defense-oriented build, I'll be swapping between a crit rate circlet and defense circlet for these weapons. I'll explain exactly why defense circlet for Harbinger of Dawn in the artifact section. With the Cinnabar, which definitely suits his look, this is what a high-end Albedo stats would look like. Artifacts providing plus 67 crit rate and plus 94 crit damage, and his generic stats sitting at a very comfortably precise 1-to-2 crit rate to crit damage ratio with good defense. Pause if you need to for his generic artifacts here. And here's what he looks like with the Harbinger of Dawn and a defense circlet. Alright, let's dive into his talents. So, Albedo is not like the rest. On his first release, people were generally not sure on how to optimize for him, since usually characters revolve around their burst damage. For him, his burst damage is attack scaling, yet his elemental skill is mostly defense scaling. His kit needed a little convincing for people to understand that his elemental skill is his main source of damage, is very easy to set up, and applies 100% of its effectiveness without Albedo even being on the field. Not only that, but in 1.2 we didn't have access to the new Cinnabon weapon, but we did have a powerful 3-star weapon that he uniquely utilizes perfectly, the Harbinger of Dawn. So that brings us to his talents and explaining exactly how he works. First off, his normal attack. It's clean and looks cool. Besides proccing a stack of 4-piece husk before switching out, don't worry about his normal attack. But here's a cool aesthetic with Chongyun E and his N4. Elemental skill. So this is the flower-looking platform that he places on the ground and sets up a field for. It's called a Solar Isotoma. Placing this down is the first tick of AoE geo damage, referenced here as skill damage. This is the attack scaling and only happens when you place his skill down. Now, when enemies take damage in this field, they also can take AoE geo damage once every 2 seconds. These are what's called transient blossoms and has very explicit defense scaling. The platform also elevates after a certain time, providing safety for example, Klee to rain dodecal bombs on unsuspecting enemies. This ability lasts for 30 seconds or until destroyed, 4-second cooldown for placing it, meaning 100% uptime. At level 11, Transient Blossom damages 254% defense every 2 seconds. A standard 40 energy low cost burst, for example like Albedo's, typically has a 12-second cooldown. So Albedo in this time frame can deal 6 instances of Transient Blossom damage, which is over 1500% multiplier at level 11. This also brings in his Ascension 1 passive. Transient Blossoms from his elemental skill deal 25% additional damage to enemies below 50%, a little free boost of damage. This 25% more damage is in the same column as geo damage or elemental or physical damage. The 25% is anywhere between 12 to 15% DPS increase. Elemental Burst, basically an AoE geo damage nuke that does additional damage if his Isotoma is on the field. So though the multiplier looks pretty nice, 514% initial and 100.8% up to 7 additional times if the skill is on the field. In actual battle though, this additional burst activation usually only hits about 3 times on the same enemy. Also, this multiplier is entirely attack scaling, so you'd have to sacrifice his skill damage, which is the defense portion of his build, for burst damage, unless you have Constellation 2, which we'll get into. Most of the time, proccing his burst is actually a loss of DPS for your team. Not only does he have to be on the field when he activates his burst, but it's also iframe and also energy gain, right? But most of the time, his burst is actually a loss of DPS for your team, because it mainly requires him to be on field in the animation time. His value comes primarily from his off-field Transient Blossom damage, his off-field Transient Blossom defense scaling DPS, allowing more on-field time for your main DPS. His burst, though, is valuable in situations where his Ascension 4 passive can be utilized. This grants 125 elemental mastery to the party post-burst. This is perfect for situations maximizing consistent vaporize or melt damage and where Albedo's off-field DPS can be slotted in as a single standalone slot. So, talent priority-wise, it should be pretty straightforward. Recommend max investing in his elemental skill first, then burst as needed, leaving normal attack at 1 unless you're planning on some spicy on-field Albedo DPS. I would say the elemental skill is worth investing to level 8 or higher. Burst, I would only go higher if you have Constellation 2. So, onto Albedo's playstyle. Universal method even if using Harbinger of Dawn for 90% HP maintenance or maximizing the 4-piece husk set uptime. To place the Isotoma, this would grant 1 husk stack, auto once right afterwards for the first Transient Blossom, this will grant 2 husk stacks, and then switch out. Things to note, be wary of Isotoma placement because it can be destroyed just like placing a Zhongli Pillar on boss hitboxes where it just fades. Same thing can happen with Albedo's Isotoma. This method grants 2 husk stacks near immediately in the first 0.5 seconds, which leaves only 6 seconds for the next 4 stacks. However, his elemental skill does snapshot. To maximize the gain from 4-piece husk if you're using that set, after 6 seconds where he does have a max stack husk, swap him in again to reset his skill, auto once again, and then swap out. These are min-max details to fully utilize the husk set. I would still recommend getting used to that playstyle because even when you get the 4-piece husk set, it'll already be in your muscle memory. His burst primarily should be used right before certain team burst setups to gain the 125 elemental mastery for the team. Otherwise, it can be used as you please as long as you maintain the swift elemental skill into auto one's playstyle, even if including his burst. This is to maximize his DPS in basically every situation. So if you are Constellation 2, capitalizing on his 4-stack Fatal Reckoning before activating Elemental Burst is in your best interest. Besides that, his general playstyle is pretty straightforward. On to weapons. So I was originally thinking of only including the 2 relevant weapons, Harbinger of Dawn and Cinnabar, as the test subjects. But yeah, I included a couple more to give you guys a broader view on how different weapons change up his damage output. So here's what we have on the roster. 3-star Harbinger of Dawn, 4-star Favonius, Festering Desire, and Cinnabar, 5-star Jade Cutter, and Mist Splitter. So these are all the remotely relevant weapons that you'd even consider using on Albedo. So I've included all of them, but only 2 of the weapons actually have decent defense for him, and you know which 2 they are. They aren't the 5-star weapons. Before the discussion, let's test. Quick reminder though, I am not using 4-piece husk set because I don't have a good 4-piece yet. These tests are done with 2 Petra and 2-piece Noblesse. I'm currently grinding for husk artifacts, so hopefully by the time Ito comes out, please, RNG, please! And as a quick reminder, crit rate food is used to speed up testing, does not increase or decrease the damage numbers shown at the end of the comparison. Alright, 3-star weapons. So here's how the trusty Harbinger of Dawn performs. Should be no surprise how strong this weapon is for Isotoma-based Albedo. Artifacts used: defense, geo, defense, main stat. Explanation for this in the artifact section. Alright, 4-star weapons. So, Favonius Sword up first. I'm including this weapon due to the passive. Damage output is going to be expectedly weak. This weapon is going to be using a standard defense, geo, and crit rate build. Alright, Festering Desire next. So, this is the free Dragon Spine weapon from way back when. Standard def geo crit, same build as Favonius Sword. And then finally, Cinnabar. This is the new free best in slot weapon, only tested at R1 here and at level 80. I will eventually R590 this weapon, but for now, evening out the playing field with R180. Standard Def Geo crit rate. Alright, so those are the 4-star weapons. Favonius Sword is weak, but it's useful for Team Battery. That's the only reason why you'd run Favonius Albedo. Festering Desire, basically no longer applicable for Albedo since we have Cinnabar now. This weapon can be freed up for other sword users that may use it, for example like Jean or GOMC. Cinnabar, so even at R180, this weapon beats out R5 Harbinger of Dawn. Definitely the best choice, especially since no one else in the game currently can use it well. I'm excited to see later, once I R590 and finish Husk 4-piece, how Albedo's damage will look then. The damage numbers that we're all comparing for these 4-star weapons are primarily focused on the skill damage for the defense-based stuff. Okay, 5-star weapons. So, Jade Cutter first. This one is at R190. I'm switching up my build a little bit to have a crit damage mass to offset the immense amount of crit rate that this weapon provides. I'm still going to be maintaining 2-piece Petra and 2-piece Noblesse here as a control for the other tests. Stat numbers for this weapon will be on the chart. Alright, finally, Mist Splitter at R590. This is going to be a standard defense geo crit rate build. So, it's easy to see that 5-star weapons on Albedo are primarily used to maximize his burst damage. And the burst damage you can see is like 40 to 50% stronger than the other 4-star options that we had. And that makes sense because these weapons don't provide an easy way to forge in defense percent and have higher base attack than the lower starred weapons. But Harbinger of Dawn with a defense geo defense build and Cinnabar, they both smack the highest in terms of raw skill damage from the Transient Blossoms. Cinnabar isn't even R590 yet, which would increase the defense boost for him. This would go from 62.9 to 69% at level 90. Nice. So basically, I'd recommend to keep the Cinnabar on Albedo. It's free, it's easy to R590, especially during the event, where enhancing event weapon gives 1.5x additional EXP. If you're watching this video and investing in Albedo, then get this weapon to level 90. I would leave these other OP 5-star swords for main DPS sword carries. Albedo will smack them really hard with this weapon while studying alchemy on the bench off-field. On to artifacts. So for Albedo, 2.3 did introduce to us his new best in slot artifact set, 4-piece Husk set. The 4-piece effect may seem a little daunting, but it's actually pretty simple. It stacks up to 4 times whenever the equipping character deals geo damage, every 0.3 seconds when on-field or 3 seconds when off-field. Max stacks grants additional 24% defense and geo damage. Combined with 30% defense from the 2-piece, this set can give 54% defense and 24% geo damage. Is it easy to use on Albedo? Yes, super straightforward. Playstyle was already explained in an early section if you want to jump back there. For Albedo with proper rotations, you'll get 4-piece stacks in 6.5 seconds, but you do need to switch him back in to replace his Isotoma because it does snapshot. There's a very crucial thing that I think a lot of people miss about him, that he snapshots his elemental skill. And it's much more important now since Husk set is his best set, but it's stacking, so snapshotting is very important. What this means is the initial Isotoma that Albedo places down will be 0 stack Husk damage. This will remain 0 stack damage until he replaces his Isotoma after the 6 or 7 seconds of stacking. After that point, his Isotoma will be dealing 4 stack damage. This min-maxing is to optimize the 24% def and geo bonus from that set. So, besides the 4-piece Husk set, similar to the prep video, we still have other options that do sacrifice his damage output, unfortunately. 4-piece Tenacity set. The 2-piece 20% HP doesn't matter, but the buff from the 4-piece does. Albedo's uptime for his elemental skill is 100% for 4-piece buff, so essentially 20% attack and 30% shield strength all the time. This, however, tremendously sacrifices his personal off-field damage, so consider what you need the most for your team. Generally, 4-piece Husk will be more valuable. Other standard 2-piece sets, you guys see my current build, which has been the staple since he was first released. 2-piece Petra for 15% geo damage bonus, and 2-piece Noblesse for the 20% burst damage. Though the Noblesse portion can just be 3 off pieces with good substats. Doesn't have to be this because it doesn't benefit his elemental skill damage. So all these builds are very effective. If you plan on grabbing the future Geo characters, then you'll likely prioritize as many Husk pieces as possible for the multiple characters scaling off defense and Geo. Newer players unable to farm the 5-star artifacts yet can consider using Defender's Will 2-piece and Gambler's 2-piece for the defense and skill damage increase. Main stats. Timepiece. I would always recommend to be defense, even when stacking 4-piece Husk and Cinnabar. His burst cost is naturally low at only 40 energy, and is only at most 1/3 of his practical damage output, so there's very little reason to run an energy recharge timepiece. Attack timepiece if you instead want big burst damage, but that loses effectiveness if you have C2. Goblet. Geo is the priority here. Defense Goblet is much less efficient, but it's still viable if you have no other option. It's about half as effective as a Geo Goblet, even if the defense main stat is greater. Alright, time for the mask. So, if you're running Harbinger of Dawn, please run a defense circlet. It provides the sweetest balance of defense percent and crit damage, because what would normally be provided by the weapon, which is usually attack, is not for Albedo, since he wants defense for his elemental skill. Harbinger of Dawn also provides an entire artifact worth of crit rate and crit damage, assuming above 90% HP, 28% crit rate, and 42.7 crit damage, which is even higher at level 90. The defense main stat is also 58.3% instead of the usual 46.6 for attack percent or HP percent, so the loss of stats is actually not as much as usual. It's basically an equivalent trade-off between defense and crit damage, because crit damage is 62.2%. All of these factors contribute to defense circlet being insanely balanced for Harbinger of Dawn Albedo. If you decide to run a crit damage circlet instead, either you're going to need 30% defense on the substats, or your crit damage is going to be over 200%, but your defense increase drops from 130% to 70%. You can see my current stats with a defense Geo defense build here. A very nice 120 to 130% defense, along with 182 crit damage. If I instead did a crit damage mask, my crit damage would be like 240, and my defense would be like 1.3k, which is much lower and less damage. So, Jade Cutter is in a similar boat and also wants a defense circlet, but it's not as necessary. Defense Geo Defense Jade, though, will be stronger than a Defense Geo Crit Damage Jade Cutter with similar substats, so keep that in mind. For any other weapon, including the Cinnabar, run a standard crit rate or crit damage mask. Cinnabar gamers, I would recommend running Defense, Geo, and crit rate main stat. Alright, time for Constellations. It's going to be heavy overlap with the rerun prep guide. So, Constellation 1, this is the 1.2 of flat energy every 2 seconds, or Albedo even if off-field, as long as his skill is dealing blossom damage. It's great for burst time, but not really meaningful until Constellation 2, where his burst does significantly more damage. So, is Constellation 2. Isotoma Transient Blossoms, which are the defense-based procs up to every 2 seconds, stack up to 4 times, each increasing his burst damage by 30% of his defense. Combined with Constellation 1, his burst being 40 energy cost on a 12-second cooldown, C2 enables him to scale his burst with his defense with minimal effort. 8 seconds to charge to max stacks, and you can easily see how many stacks he has even when off-field. Burst damage increase with a well-invested Albedo on defense is about 25 to 40% with Constellation 2 for his burst. C3, plus 3 levels to elemental skill. Straightforward is where I stopped investing my Albedo at. This is where his skill damage caps out. It's about a 20% increase. C4, while his Isotoma is active, Xiao gets a plunge damage increase. Okay, well, other characters too, I suppose, but like, yeah, really it's just Xiao. Constellation 5, plus 3 levels to burst. Standard, plus 20% multiplier increase. C6, 70% damage increase to crystallize his shielded party members. It's nice. It's a free 10% damage DPS increase, but it's at Constellation 6, so it's like, yeah. But yeah, so for his Constellations, nothing is really needed here at all. C1 and C2 are focused more on his burst damage. C3 is the only one that improves that is skill damage, and it's just the plus 3 levels one. C3 is what I invested at. If you're a whale and want to max my skill damage, this is where you should stop at. But all of his value is already there at C0, so he's not a Constellation-hungry character to perform well. Team comps. Alright, for team building, Albedo is aiming to provide solid sub-DPS, along with either double Geo Resonance or assisting React teams with his Ascension 4 125 EM party buff. This makes his combination with Zhongli excellent. This pair of Zhongli and Albedo can fit on any team composition slot that has 2 open pairs. The current compositions that maximize Albedo's value are the Hu Tao Xingqiu is probably one of the easiest to fit in, providing Geo Resonance for additional damage, 125 Elemental Mastery for Hu Tao vaporizes, and shielding instead of healing to maintain Hu Tao's passive. The great thing about this composition is that Albedo's skill does what's called weak Geo damage. Basically simplified, this means it has very little interference with existing vaporized reactions between Hu Tao and Xingqiu that you want to maintain between this composition. It'll take a while to get into this discussion, but basically just understand that Albedo with Hu Tao and Xingqiu works excellently. Secondly, a composition like Xiao plus an Anemo battery or Bennett in this slot. So, Xiao loves Zhongli's shield for that sweet Anemo resistance shred, not available through any other means. Albedo provides the extra resonance and sub DPS, while Xiao is plunging. And Bennett for the more attack transfer, or a Nemo battery like a Jean to refund the burst and also to heal. It's a very stable composition focused on Xiao main DPS. And then finally, which I unfortunately cannot show right now because they're not out yet, but Mono Geo. This is especially with Ito and Goro coming out right around the corner, and all of them having something to do with defense scaling and or buffing. Albedo may once again fill into another team comp like that with ease. I'll be covering the upcoming Geo characters as best as possible with my guides within the holiday season. However, with Geo Resonance and Mono Geo teams like that, keep in mind that Albedo's off-field DPS with Transient Blossoms does not gain from Geo Resonance. The only damage that is buffed by that resonance is dealt when he's on field, for example, when he's on the field casting his burst. It's a small detail, but worth mentioning because Mono Geo is actually coming with 2.3. Other options that work excellently here: Eula plus an Electro Superconduct like Raiden Shogun, for example. Official main DPS plus Cryo Superconduct, for example. Klee, Yoimiya, or Diluc plus a Hydro Enabler, just like the Hu Tao composition. Same thing. And then a Raiden or Kaching plus Mono or Xingqiu for an Electro Charge composition. Any of these dual DPS options that are reactive based and have 2 open slots for both Jiangli and Albedo work excellently. Otherwise, Albedo by himself can fit whenever a solid sub DPS and a 125 elemental mastery buff is needed. And especially with the new Cinnabar weapon and a 4-piece husk set, he can definitely hold his own with very strong, noticeable off-field AoE DPS. Alright, let's showcase some comps where he fits well even as a standalone character, using the new Cinnabar at R180 with the standard 2-piece Petra build. The purpose of these showcases is to demonstrate how impactful his off-field DPS can be with the free weapon at a high investment. Cue the music, Mr. Cope. And with the showcase complete, that about wraps up the core of this guide. With one of the safest playstyles and unique build paths, Albedo excels at providing cozily consistent elemental skill-based damage while sketching at the alchemy table. If this guide helped you understand Albedo a little better, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's free and really helps the video get recommended and reach a broader audience. Thanks for watching, and I wish that everyone still trying to pull Albedo the best of luck. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.